morning, everybody. And this is a very important session because we have three eminent panelists with us who are expert in their own field. And as was mentioned in the morning session, that Indian economy is growing and the energy demand is also growing with that. And which has also thrown many challenges and likely challenges to come if we adopt whatever is happening rather than adapt it. So when we talk about the development is taking place, it's taking place in a big way now in the terms of the large-scale sector coming up and even the MSME also coming up. And all these industries, if they are in the scope of the environmental clearance, they need to have EIA studies conducted and the environmental clearance. So industries face really challenges when they talk about the environmental clearances. The time taken, the report submission, evaluation of the reports, and various queries raised by the committees from time to time, and the challenges faced. So we have the three experts, and first is, the next to me is Mr. Prashant Gogate. He's a chemical engineer from IIT Mumbai and has a 42 years experience of the industry's experience. And he has conducted the first environmental impact assessment study in 1985 and has since led numerous EIA studies across various sectors, including fertilizers, petrochemicals, power, cement. He has managed an environmental monitoring firm for 15 years and currently is the head of the environment department at Reliance Industry for its manufacturing function. So with a person like Mr. Prashant, having experience in the EIA sector for around now 40 years experience since he did his first EIA in 85. So he is the person who can be a better person to answer most of the questions because he has faced in that. So welcome, Mr. Prashant.
Thank you, sir.
So with your large experience in this field, so you must have entered into various EIA studies and must have faced many challenges. So when we say challenges, this can be in terms of what the report you have submitted or the queries that has been raised or the procedural problems, issues related to the management of EIAs. What you feel is the major challenge when you talk about the EIA studies? Where is the major time taken for EIA studies? Like when you talk about EIA that you get the report, then you talk about the EC, but you need to have the forest clearance first, forest clearance second, and that takes a lot of time, and till that time your EC is not implementable. So what you feel is the major challenge and how that can be curtailed in the process so that the time taken by the industry to come to start construction or commission is reduced drastically.
Yes, sir. That was very crisply put by you because, see, the present procedure for making an EIA where the baseline study itself is defined in the TOR, that 12 weeks of ambient air quality needs to be carried out. Now, the reason for 12 weeks is really something which is not very clear because other than ambient air quality, the soil, water, noise, all these parameters are done only once during the baseline in one season. And for a rapid environmental impact assessment study, I mean 12 weeks is a very long time, which itself takes 3 months for the baseline to be completed. Now that's probably a thing which could be shortened to even a month, and about 4 weeks of monitoring itself should be more than sufficient to establish the AAQ in any particular area per se. As far as forest clearance and wildlife clearances are concerned, if a project actually involves forest clearances and wildlife clearances, then there are two things which are possible as per my thing. Either the forest clearances should be de-linked from the EIA process, where the EIA needs to be carried out independently and not linked to the, EC should not be linked to the forest clearance, so that the forest clearance independently should be carried out, probably even before the EIA process is started. The forest clearance should be started and the forest clearance should also be speeded up. That these are the major things which I can point out at this point of time.
Mr. Prashant, you mentioned about the two major aspects. That is, one is the baseline data, which takes a lot of time. And second is the forest clearance. So my point is that with so much industrialization taking place and the network of the government departments as well as the private sector being spread over the country for monitoring. So what is your suggestion that this 3 months time period for the data collection, for the baseline, can be curtailed while ensuring that you generate precise, reliable and acceptable data?
Yes, sir. Because, see, if a nationwide network is available, then that data should be used for ascertaining the impacts. And it should not be left to any consultants or any other agency which is doing the monitoring to establish the data and then not compare it with any available data also, which also actually doesn't serve the purpose.
Okay, the last point was, you mentioned about the environmental forest clearances also. So, as you know that yes, forest clearance is a vital part of any project which is coming in the forest, reserve forest or sensitive zone or that. So, what mechanism or what is the way out you suggest that the time from when the metal was detected in that area or the mineral was detected in that area and the excavation could start can be curtailed drastically rather than waiting for 10 years or 12 years before we get permission and do the things? How it can be curtailed?
See, the process itself for no apparent reason takes time.
Can you specify apparent reason? Can you specify that?
The process does not define as to exact amount of time, 10 years, 12 years as you say. The process should technically get completed within a 6 months period. Why it takes so long is because of various queries which come up, various probably sometimes shortcomings in the reports which are being submitted. All these things contribute to the time which is being taken.
I have just a suggestion. I would like to know your view on that. Can we have a national data bank where all the data is available and it can be taken for the baseline, which will save the industry 3 months? That is one point. Second point is when we talk about the forest clearance. So once identified area is identified for excavation, can it not be that the formalities required for EC are completed by the government department and the land handed over to the party after paying certain charges? What are the expenditure? Can it be a way out to save that time?
Yes, sir. Definitely it can be a way out.
Thank you, Mr. Prashant.
Thank you, sir.
We'll come back to you later on. So we have with us Mr. Ray. He is a doctorate in chemistry from the University of Pennsylvania. Has over 30 years of experience in the chemical and energy industries. His research spans conducting polymers, chemical reaction engineering, and applied research in fuels, lubricants, and catalysis. Has over 100 peer-reviewed articles and hold more than 10 international patents. Formerly the director of CSIR, Indian Institute of Petroleum. He had led the commercialization of over 30 technologies. Dr. Ray is currently an investment partner at Navam Capital and a life fellow of the Indian Chemical Society and an advocate for human rights and environmental conservation. So Dr. Ray has been working with the technological aspects and all this. So Dr. Ray, what do you feel that with the, as mentioned in the early morning session, inaugural session also, that the challenges, environmental challenges are increasing with the economic growing and more industrialization taking place. Do you feel that the Indian standards are relaxed as compared to the foreign standards? That is the one thing. Second, is it possible to adopt those standards directly, considering the wide gap in the technology that is available presently in the industry and the scale of operation of the large scale and the medium scale sector?
Both of these are deeply thought-provoking and searching questions, Mr. Kamyotra. Let me start with a very fundamental point where you opened your query to me, that any time we do any industrial activity, we are contributing to climate change. That's a given. Because anytime I run a machine, the efficiency of a machine is less than 100%. And if the machine runs on any kind of fossil energy, the gap between the energy input and the work output is our contribution to climate change. So the more machines we run and the less efficiently we run them, the more the impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So this is on the climate change side. But on the other aspects of pollution where you as CPCB see it up close, whether it is the ambient air quality that Mr. Gogate referred to, the water pollution, or the solid waste disposal rules, I think that the standards are meant to provide a set of common practices and a set of common guidelines to manufacturers such that consumers are able to understand. It is not coincidental that the Bureau of Indian Standards sits in the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. It doesn't sit in the Ministry of Industry. So ultimately the intent is to protect the consumer. And to that extent, if we were to simply adopt standards from abroad blindly, it actually is a disservice to the nation. I think the BIS has done a decent job over the last several years to listen to the voice of industry, listen to the voice of consumer groups, and find standards that are practically adoptable. The problem that I'm seeing now, reference to what you mentioned, particularly with the MSMEs, is that the pace of technological change is fast, and very often a foreign standard becomes predicated on some very expensive equipment or test method. And that is where we start seeing real challenges. Now for an MSME, we have three imperatives. And it's true for all industry, but MSMEs, they face it worse. The first is capital efficiency, the second is labor efficiency, and the third is the ability to invest in innovation. Now, if I'm a small player and I'm getting my money in 120 days from my customer, and my vendors, particularly large vendors, want their money up front, I am squeezed for cash. Where do I invest in innovation? Where do I invest in standardization? Where do I invest in pollution control? So it becomes imperative that we look at the MSME ecosystem sympathetically, but at the same time recognize that if somebody is producing something, they are responsible at the end of the day to people and the planet. And I think an extended dialogue is needed to enable them to do this more effectively.
Mr. Ray, you talk about the parity in the standards. So if you look into the challenges, they vary from location to location, especially in our country. And the technology which is available, what you call the best available technology or best available practices, need to be compatible with the existing technology also. And that many times is not viable. Take an example of, everybody sitting here, example of power plant standards which came in 2015, which talk about FGD also. And till date, FGD has not been implemented. It's after even 9 years. So my point to you is that, do we need to replicate what is being done by the other countries, even if we don't have those issues? Because our issue with SO2 is not there. We don't have SO2 major issue in the country. But still we talk about FGD, where we need to spend a lot of money, around 1 crore per megawatt. So do you think this parity in the standards, just because somebody is following it, and to have it here is justified?
When we were small, there was a story in our Hindi book called Nakal Mein Bhi Akal Chahiye, where a monkey copies somebody shaving and cuts himself very badly. I don't think we should be copying anything at all. The point that you made, for example, today, even at the MSMEs, we have pushed our fuel oil standards down, and therefore our fuel oil prices have moved up over the last few years as we reduce sulfur to international levels. But when we look at what you can do to reduce the emissions from fuel oil, there are technologies available today that can be adopted even at small-scale boilers, furnaces, kilns, and certainly adopted at very large scales. You can use water and fuel oil emulsions, you can use additives, you can do many things that are not requiring FGD, especially when the sulfur content is under 1% in the feed. So technologies exist. I think that when we scan the global world for standards and policies, we must also scan the global south, not only the global north. We have a tendency to copy the global north, the developed countries.
Since you talk about the mini boilers, small boilers, and you talk about the parity of standards, so last question to you is, do you think that environmental control has some cost? And I just complete, has some cost. And it may not be economical viable for a small scale sector or the medium scale sector to have a sustainable environmental abatement and control issues, policies. So can we have a cap on the bottom line that yes, below this minimum, no industry can be permitted, a cap on that? That is the first point. Second point was when you mentioned that globally we have different standards. So just you look into the ambient air quality standards. So, no, I just come to that now. We always talk about WHO guidelines, but they never take into account what is our scenario. Take example of SO2. We have very low SO2. So why can't they have that as a benchmark rather than we following their benchmark for particulate matter? You see, we need to look into our scenario also, that what is possible for us and what is not possible. So, but we try to copy PM10 from there, but they will never copy SO2 from us. You see, that's the first point. The last in this added is, now in the morning we talk about the critically polluted areas also. So that areas are which have been already polluted. So efforts have been made or action plans have been prepared to reduce, improve the environment in those areas. At the same time, we are allowing industries to come in new areas where pollution is also impacting. So now the thing is that we are not allowing industry to come into the critically polluted area, but we are allowing industry to come into clean area. So is it right to make the clean area dirty rather than making the dirty area clean? What is your philosophy on that with your experience?
My experience has been, because I've worked across industries now, that usually investment in environment, investment in safety, investment in worker health, these all pay you back fairly quickly. In fact, it is not to be seen as a cost, but as an investment. The question is whether the ecosystem supports that. Does a bank give a loan to a company that is seeking to reduce its emissions? Or does it say, no, we only need to see extra production? What is our financing mechanism for pollution control investments? Does the government have green bonds? So if you go to Thailand, it's a small country, right, compared to our economy. Thailand has issued in the last 7 years $1 billion of green bonds. So people who believe in green invest in those bonds, and they have a coupon rate much lower than the coupon rate that is there for prevailing capital. Now, if a company makes a green investment, they can use the green bond for their financing. So we will need some innovative mechanisms also. At the end of the day, I think policy and regulation works less because people will find shortcuts than financial incentives, because that's what ultimately all companies get measured on. If you're an MSME also today, you might be on the stock market, you'll be subject to SEBI regulations. And your profitability, your cash flows, everything comes under question. So I think we need to marry fiscal incentives with policies and regulations or fiscal models. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. We have Commandant S.K. Singh with us. He is a retired person, and he has retired from the Indian Coast Guard after 35 years of distinguished service. He is a postgraduate in pollution control with over 15 years of experience in marine oil pollution response, and has commanded various vessels and served as district commander in Odisha and Tamil Nadu. He is an expert in oil spill response and has been an instructor for IMO, OPRC courses and drafted oil spill contingency plan for various industries. Post-retirement, he continues to provide consultancy on oil spill response and contingency planning, and he remains active as a faculty member for IMO, OPRC courses. So Dr. Singh, welcome. And with your long experience in oil spill management, and as we heard in the morning also that the energy demand for the country will be around 4 times what is present in the next 25 years. And as a result, number of drillings and number of expansion of the refinery capacity or petrochemical industries is taking place presently. And most of these drillings are either in the waterways or offshore. And recently we had some accidents in Assam also with oil blown out of the well and had caused a lot of damage. So what you feel that while clearing the projects in the EIA, environmental clearances, so what you feel that the minimum bare requirement should be there for each facility to prevent accidental happenings from these wells or facilities and having saving the environment from the damage? Bare minimum facility, what you feel should be there?
Thank you for the question. As per my experience during my surveys, I have seen that especially on the coastline, the industry people are slightly bit hesitant to invest in taking the basic facilities to prevent the oil spill. Whatever oil spill we have been witnessed, it was seen that the industry was ill-prepared, or the resources which were required to contain it or to prevent it were not taken into consideration while drawing their plans setting up of the industry. As a result, the Coast Guard has to come in between, though we are being the central coordinating authority or agency in the country to see the marine oil pollution in the Indian waters. And we have been there all around. But then, as per the OPRC convention, all oil handling agencies, they must have tier 1 facilities with them to contain or to prevent the oil spill. So during my experience over the maritime states, I have seen that both the governmental as well as the private industry is yet to have the tier 1 facilities with them. And maybe I don't know what is the constraint, because money cannot be the constraint for them. Basically the will to do that, it is hampering. Even the contingency plan for oil spill is yet not to be made, yet to be done by the various industry. And I'm sure the Coast Guard is again and again requesting all the agencies to have their contingency plan in place so that these accidents can be avoided and the environmental damages can be preserved. The only thing is that on the shore, inland, I'm not aware of, because my exposure was mainly on the sea. So I will not be able to comment on the landward side. Thank you.
Okay. Next question is that when it comes to the implementation of the regulations, especially the environmental regulation, there is a lack of understanding among the regulators that up to what level the Water Act is applicable or the Environmental Protection Act is applicable. So that's the one question. Second thing is, it has been observed that oil release is there from the ships taking place either in the international waters or in the Indian territorial waters, and which is especially in the western coast. And during monsoon period, you have a lot of mud balls rolling into the coast of Goa. So what you feel that what is the mechanism to control or monitor such spills and how it can be controlled?
Sir, although question, if I may permit it, I will give my presentation. In that, everything is covered. So let me first do the presentation.
Okay,
thereafter, the question can be answered.
So one quick question to all the 3 panelists now. Now, when you talk about compliance, so the question comes, the monitoring. Yeah, so that means whatever we talk about monitoring, that's the target should be monitorable. So what you feel is the lacking. So when we say that all the industries are complying, all the EIS indicate yes, the air quality is very good. All the remedial actions are taken, environmental management plans are prepared, but still air quality is deteriorating over the period of time. So where you feel is the gap that the true scenario is not coming into picture, whereas we have something which is not reflecting the true picture. So, Mr. Prashant, with your experience of Reliance, you have so many plants, and EIA, what you feel can be done?
Sir, I think the control, as was even said earlier, in very large industries is not much of a problem, especially the way continuous emission monitoring, continuous effluent monitoring is being implemented today. The controls are there and they are being followed in most of the cases. The only question comes in deterioration when there is a deviation from the standard or the prescribed norms which are there, which could be for varying periods of time. It could be for a few hours, it could be for a few days, depending on the type of flaws which have caused it. And a corrective action which is needed for that needs to be taken in some at least specified amount of time. Now, if such a deviation is permitted, as per no Indian law, there is a deviation which is permitted from any prescribed standards. But in a continuous process industry especially, if there is a deviation and if the plant has to be stopped for doing any correction, then stopping and starting of the plant also will cause more pollution. So a definite period of time, if it is permitted for any corrective action and the deviation is permitted for that particular amount of time, then probably the deterioration would be lesser than in any other case where the plant has to be stopped or restarted. And these things need to be taken into account when we prescribe the norms, and they should not be instantaneous in nature, and they should be more industry understanding and technology understanding in nature. That is what I feel.
Thank you. What is your view, Mr. Ray?
I think that the thing that is most lacking right now in the gap between intent and actuality is trust between stakeholders. Different stakeholders are coming from different perspectives, and free sharing of data for a common cause is not as common as we see. So my belief is that particularly if we have industrial clusters or we are working with state governments or local administration in districts, if there is a common reporting that is seen of what's happening to air quality, what's happening on a continuous basis, and that common reporting is then devolved down to trying to find who are the larger contributors to the outages, then the ecosystem should support them to come into line, not beat them up. Because at the end of the day, if one succeeds, everybody succeeds. You know, what happened down in Erode in Tirupur many years ago when there were dye stuff related outages, and you shut everybody down. Now that's not a common cause response. Once upon a time, I think this used to be India's strength, that we work together as a community. Right now, we are tending to work with the industry works for itself, the monitoring agency works for itself. If you align the targets and make sure there's a dashboard that is seen all the time, I think we'll get better results. We saw that, for example, in COVID. Once the oxygen plant ecosystem was in place, you had live dashboards. And from a situation where oxygen was a dire challenge, suddenly oxygen was available within 6 months across the country. And today, if you had a fresh pandemic, God forbid, we would not have that crisis. I think it's learning and collaborating where we need to get better.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Mr. Commandant Singh, like to add something to that?
I would say I will speak only on marine oil pollution or the oil industry which is there on the coastline. For monitoring purposes, the DG shipping as well as the Indian Coast Guard is there. And though there are HSEs are available in all the industry, and state pollution control boards are there, but then all of them are not working in tandem. If everybody is in tandem and straight away follows the regulations which are there, which is not Government of India, it is basically the international convention which we are following. If everybody is looking into that and follows in word spirit, I think there should be no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. So one thing which came out that yes, continuous monitoring is required. So I'd just like to add, Mr. Ray, that India started continuous monitoring of affluent and air quality in 2014. And all the major industries which are categorized as red category of industries and need to install continuous emission monitoring system. And at the same time, the industries are required to install affluent monitoring system also. So these systems are already installed in major industries, red category of industries, and all the industries which are discharging into any of the water bodies. So, Mr. Prashant, this online monitoring has not been brought into the regime of legal regime so far, because as per the Act, Water Act or the Air Act or the Environmental Protection Act, continuous monitoring does not form a part of taking the sample methodology. So what do you feel that, yes, how SEMS or OCMS which have been installed can help the industry? Because when the concept was brought, it was to change away from the command and control thing and bring it to self-compliance and regulation mechanism. So how far it has been successful in meeting its objective or targets?
I think, Mr. Kamyotra, this particular exercise of continuous monitoring has started sometime in your regime itself. And although it was only a dialogue between the CEMS system and CPCB to start with, I think in recent years it has been extended to connectivity to state pollution control boards also, as well as with CPCB. And with the state pollution control boards, it has gone into the public domain also. I mean, today if I want to see from any state pollution control board what is the emission levels, real-time emission levels in any industry, I am able to see that. And your question regarding the regulatory regime, and of course which will form a probably some penal actions also, I think it is only a question of time that it will follow, and it should follow. In fact, if the system has to be effective, only thing is that the consideration of various parameters which will decide on what is called a deviation or what is not called a deviation should be more thoroughly looked into and firmed up before any such penal actions are decided on based on the CEMS results which are being transmitted.
Thank you. Mr. Ray, like to add something?
I think that there is, as you already said, a great distinction between the larger and effectively also, as you get larger, your ability to spread out costs of things like CMS over large revenue and large fixed cost base improves. I think we need better cluster planning. We need to have clusters of MSMEs supported with proper R&D, with proper monitoring system networks, and with the understanding that monitoring is not like a class monitor who reports you to the teacher. Monitoring is for your good and the good of all around you. I think it's that common understanding that is more important.
Dr. Singh, like to add something? Okay. So, Dr. Singh will be making a small presentation, 15 minutes, and then we have few questions, time permitting, from the audience also.
Good morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Next 15 minutes or so, I will be discussing the regulatory regime of marine oil pollution in India. And since morning, we are discussing the pollution, air pollution, pollution on land. Now I am taking to the sea. India is primarily a maritime country with a rich nautical tradition. For millennia, the India seaboard has been a hub of vigorous maritime activity. We still have the ruins of a dry dock at Lothal in Gujarat that dates back to 3700 BC, which is a part of the Indian Indus Valley civilization that thrived in the western part of the country. Ancient seamen sailed from these ports to far-off destinations including Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and east coast of Africa. The seafaring kingdoms of Kalinga, Cholas, Pandyas, and Cheras in Indian's east coast traveled to far-off nations in South and Southeast Asia. India was a formidable nation economically thanks to its marine prowess. Up until about 1500 AD, India had the highest GDP in the world, according to the research by historian Angus Madison. Since the advent of British rule, the development of the indigenous shipping industry was discouraged because of preferential treatment given to British shipping. The restrictive British navigation law not only hindered the growth of Indian shipping, but gradually made it disappearing from the high seas. Today, India holds a strategic position in the global trade, with the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb to its west and the Strait of Malacca to its east. These crucial trade routes handle almost 70% of the world oil. India's 12 major ports and 200 non-major ports handle approximately 90% of the country's national trade by volume and about 68% by value. Every year, India's major ports cater to over 7,000 tankers transporting crude oil, lubricants, petroleum products. Additionally, in the year 2022-23, India's demand for petroleum products amounted to over 84%, totaling about $239 million. This constituted over 19% of India's total mercantile imports. Given the above, now I will discuss the regulatory regime of the oil spill in the Indian maritime zones in terms of both prevention and liability. The hazardous effect of oil spillage necessitated a robust regulatory regime to oversee oil transportation by sea. States may either utilize regional or international instruments or rely on common law principles and statutory laws to address the oil pollution. International cooperation to combat marine environmental emergencies is facilitated by 14 international conventions and protocols. These instruments were established in response to specific oil pollution incidents, such as the Torrey-Gayon accident, which led to release of 117,000 tons of crude oil in the western approaches of the United Kingdom, causing extensive damage to the coast of Britain and France. The International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution of the Sea by Oil, that is OILPOL 1954, was adopted under the auspices of Intergovernmental Marine Consultative Organization, IMCO, which is now known as IMO. It recognized that most oil pollution resulted from routine shipboard operations such as cleaning cargo tanks. OILPOL 54 prohibited the dumping of oily waste within a certain distance from land and in special areas where the danger to the environment was especially acute. The establishment of IMO in 1958 was reinforcement of the pledge undertaken by the international community to curb the problem of marine pollution. Between 1954 to 1971, OILPOL played a key role in addressing oil pollution from the ships. It was later replaced by the International Convention for Prevention of Pollution from Ships, that is MARPOL 73-78. Both OILPOL and MARPOL set standards for preventing oil pollution caused by intentional or avoidable accidental discharges from the ship. Prevention measures focus on improving tanker design and operating procedures, including technical requirements for structure and safety. Both conventions ensure compliance through ships surveys, certification, and enforcement by state parties. The International Convention on Oil Pollution, Preparedness, Response, and Cooperation, which came into force in 1990, emphasizes the importance of international cooperation in responding to oil pollution incidents. It includes the polluter pay principle as a general principle of international environmental law and commits parties to take appropriate measures to prepare for and respond to oil pollution incidents. Prior to OPRC, there were regional agreements such as Bonn Agreement 1983 and Copenhagen Agreement 1971, which focused on cooperation in dealing with oil pollution. After the Torrey Canyon disaster in 1967, the International Convention on Civil Liability for Oil Pollution Damage, which is known as CLC-69, was adopted. It imposed limited liability on ship owners for oil discharge, introduced compulsory liability insurances, and set liability limit ranging from 4.51 million SDR, which is equivalent to $7 million US, to 89.77 million SDR, which is equivalent to $140 million US. The International Convention on Establishment of an International Fund for Compensation for Oil Pollution Damage 71, which is called as Fund Convention 71, set up an international fund providing compensation above the vessel's owner's liability. The Fund Convention was amended in 1992 and now limits compensation for a single incident to 203 million SDR, that is standard drawing rates, which is equivalent to $317 million US, including the sum paid by the ship owners or the insurers under the 1992 Civil Liability Convention. The CLC and the Fund Convention set up a system to provide compensation to victims. A supplementary fund established on 2005 through a protocol adopted in 2003, which is known as Supplementary Fund Protocol, was created to provide additional compensation beyond what is provided by CLC and the Fund Convention. The three-tier compensation regime from these conventions is given in the slide. Now I will discuss the Indian scenario. India has several laws and conventions that address the regulatory regime of marine oil pollution, and some of importance one are Maritime Zones of India Act 1976, Coast Guard Act 1978, Merchant Shipping Act 1958, and National Oil Spill Disaster Contingency Plan, which is shortly known as NOS-DGP. The Government of India enacted the Territorial Waters, Continental Shelf, Exclusive Economic Zone and Other Maritime Zone Act 1976. This act defines the boundaries of Indian territorial waters and exclusive economic zone in accordance with the UNCLOS 1972, which grants EEZ to all coastal states. The acts grant sovereign rights to 2.01 million square kilometers of ocean, allowing the country to exploit living and non-living resources. This act gives the government the power to protect its maritime environment in the maritime zones. The Indian Coast Guard established White Coast Guard Act 1978 to protect, preserve and control the marine environment and other national interest and maritime zones of India. The Coast Guard's responsibilities are outlined in Coast Guard Act 1978. In 1986, the Ministry of Shipping handed over the obligations for safeguarding the marine environment in maritime zones of India to Indian Coast Guard. Merchant Shipping Act 1958 incorporates the conventions on limitation for liability of maritime claims, that is LLMC 1976, which addresses compensation for oil spills from bunker oil, and the Civil Liability Convention CLC, which addresses oil spill damages and compensation from tankers. NOS-DCP was promulgated by Indian Coast Guard in 1996 post-accession to OPRC Convention by Government of India, which envisages Director General Indian Coast Guard as the central coordinating authority. It requires ports, oil handling agency and oil installation to keep pollution response equipment for Tier 1 responses, which are spills up to 700 tons. OPRC Convention was adopted in 1990 and promulgated in 1995. On India's accession to OPRC, Indian Coast Guard promulgated Indian Oil Spill Disaster Contingency Plan. It envisages DGICG as the CCA, as I told earlier, and defines the obligation and responsibility of each participating agency in the maritime zones of India. Now the liability regime. The laws holding India accountable for maritime accidents draws from international customs, treaties, laws based on international convention, Indian court decision, and foreign decision accepted by Indian courts. The activities involving ships are regulated by Merchant Shipping Act 1958. The Merchant Shipping Act provides a liability and insurance regime under Part 9, 10, 10A, 10B, 10C and 11A. Part 9 outlines all the safety standards for ships. In 2010, new regulations were introduced under Merchant Shipping Act, which increased the penalty for violations of the sections related to the oil pollutions. Now, liability in case of pollution from ships. In cases of collisions and maritime accidents, Part 10 of Merchant Shipping Act determines liability based on parties' fault, while an owner's responsibility may be limited under Section 352I, 352J and 352J2 prohibits the owner from doing so in cases of negligence. Ship carrying more than 2,000 tons of bulk oil must have liability insurances. The federal government is authorized to prevent or minimize oil or toxic liquid pollution under Section 356K. Regardless to the nation or flag of the ship, all ships owners bear significant responsibility under Section 352I of the Act. The Merchant Shipping Act does not prevent filing a negligence lawsuit against a party not explicitly excluded from it. According to Merchant Shipping Act, only the owner may be held accountable for responsibility unless intentionally or negligently causing harm, in which case other individuals such as operators, sailors, master and crew may be also held accountable. Liability in case of pollution from offshore installations. It is important to note that offshore facilities are governed by Part 11A of the Merchant Shipping Act. Furthermore, according to Section 352E(2) within bracket D, the floating infrastructure involved in research or the extraction of natural resources from seabed or its subsurface is not subject to these regulations unless the central government specify otherwise. Now, the lesson learned from the latest incidents. The scale of oil spillage can be immense in offshore oil and gas installations where a massive amount of oil is produced, treated and transported. Some oil spills have occurred from offshore pipeline. This may require laws that ensure adequate maintenance of the drilling sites. The sinking of MV Bingo of Sagar Island in Hooghly River with the consequent risk of oil pollution has highlighted the need for stringent legislation to deal with negligent ship owners. The issue would be addressed by incorporating the Nairobi Wreck Removal Convention provisions into the Merchant Shipping Act 1958. A communication and contingency response crisis was major drawback observed during the oil spill near the Chennai. The initial response during an offshore oil spill is vital as environmental damage can be reduced. Conclusions and the way ahead. India follows the civil liability principle for oil pollution damage. The Merchant Shipping Act under Part 10B and 10C incorporate the provisions of CLC and fund conventions, which hold the owners liable for oil pollution damage and limit the liability for the same while creating a limiting fund. The Merchant Shipping Act does not specify liability caps, unlike the CLC, which provide a formula for calculating the limitation of liability. As a result, the polluter go away without paying the sufficient quantum of liability. The MSA incorporate provisions from CLC regarding compulsory insurance, financial guarantee and right of compensation by subrogation. Both CLC and MSA hold the owner liable for oil pollution damages caused by the ship. However, it may not cover damages to the natural resources or compensation for loss of business by coastal dependents. Additionally, Merchant Shipping Act lacks a criminal liability regime for punishing party responsible for oil pollution. Oil pollution can be considered a public nuisance under the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, and a person can be held accountable for causing a public nuisance under Section 270 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita. However, the issue with applying this provision to oil pollution is prescribed penalty, which is a trivial sum of ₹1,000. The current statutory regime dealing with oil pollution in India does not differentiate between accidental and operational discharges of oil into the sea. India needs to sign Bunker Convention to cover incidents like the Goa tarring of beaches. To prevent accident at sea, the liability regime needs strengthening by imposing criminal liability on the owner and the associated persons. This can be achieved by enacting a special law with a stricter penalty or by adding a separate part to the current Merchant Shipping Act, imposing heavy fines for negligence and improper maintenance of the ships and offshore installations. In the recent years, there have been significant development in the merchant shipping industry. It has been decided that updated legislation would replace the current act to address the industry's new challenges, modernizing outdated rules, improve the ease of doing business, and comprehensive include India's commitment under various international conventions. To replace the Merchant Shipping Act of 1958 and the Coasting Vessel Act of 1938, the Merchant Shipping Bill of 2020 has been introduced. It also covers maritime responsibilities and reimbursements, ensure full compliance with India's commitment under international conventions, and emphasize accountability and transparency. The key features of the Merchant Shipping Bill 2020 are given on the slide. In the end, in the Indian Ocean, India currently holds a dominant position. It must adopt more stringent environmental protection laws to lead by instance for other Asian and African countries. Protecting sea from oil pollution is vital, and all action must be taken to safeguard our coastline. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for an informative presentation. So now we have around 7 minutes with us. So the floor is open to the audience for their question. My request is kindly introduce yourself and be very precise in your question, and name the panelists you want to ask the question. So any questions from the audience now? Dr. Pandey, please.
Commander Singh, when you were in the Coast Guard, having the responsibility of containing oil spills in the sea, did you notice any oil spill during transfer of crude oil from the ship to the crude oil storage facility in the refineries through SPM or SBM, whatever system they have? And if there are such oil spillages noticed, what kind of liability was fixed on the refineries and the loss to the nature in terms of marine ecosystem, say mangroves, corals, etc., if they got affected, were they also covered under the liability regime or not?
Sir, during my tenure, there were few spills, like one I had witnessed and I had gone over there in Vadinar, and one was off Goa. These two incidents which I have covered myself, and I was there as the on-scene commander in both in first case at Vadinar, it was from tanker to the SPM, where as soon as we came to know the incident had occurred and the pipeline had burst, immediately we had, because we had our own stations over there, so we immediately took action, and we avoided the spillage, not to go into the sensitive areas, and because we have got the booms and all. However, whatever damages were assessed by the team, the bill was given to IOC, of course, but it is a government organization. And off Goa, of course, it took some time to take action, and fortunately for us, the spill went out in the open sea. And the bills were submitted to the company through DG Shipping, and it basically which was for the natural environment as plus the Coast Guard expenditure which was incurred for these spills. In both the cases, though it took time, because DG Shipping is the central agency to deal with these situations. So in both the cases, this I am talking because we are taken specifically talk about the oil transfer. Otherwise, other accidents, about 10 of them, we have submitted the bills which were received from the people who have taken the action and the local fishermen and the industry or the tourist people. They have given the bills and those were settled amicably. Fortunately, we didn't go to the court of law and between the arbitrator and all the three people, it was settled amicably. So, yes, the second part of the question, the corals and the sensitive areas, the assessment was not done properly because I don't know why the ecological department could not come forward for assessment and claiming the damages. During when I was Director Fisheries in Coast Guard Headquarters, and we were discussing with the Director General Shipping about these bills, we could find only those bills which were coming only from the fishermen as well as the industry which were coming or who were involved in cleaning apart. The environmental part, the bills were, I don't remember any bill was there.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Last question, very, very short, because we are just on the verge of time. Last question, if there is anything.
So, this is Sanket Thapar from HPCL Mittal Energy Limited, Bathinda Refinery. So, I just wanted to bring to your notice that what we have discussed, we have only discussed regarding the time consumed in EIA reports, but total environment clearance process takes almost 1 to 1.5 years to get it totally cleared when industry can start the process. Because it is not only the EIA report, first thing is we have to go to the department, get the TOR, then after that there is EIA report, then public hearing, then all public hearing incorporations into EIA reports. Then again we have to go to the ministry to get the clearance, and it is not the end. Then we have to go to the state pollution control boards for CTEs also, and that also is time consuming after that once EC is cleared. So what I'm saying is that this whole process needs...
Can you be very specific? Because we have short of time.
Sir, what I'm saying is that we should actually, since you are also part of ministry, so I would like to bring to your notice that these time-consuming things needs to be understood and reduced as much as possible for industries to bring in. That's the only point I want to make.
Add something?
Yeah, I agreed. It needs to be reduced to as much as possible because technically the clearance should be available within 6 months from the date of application. One of the things is that now, today I think the baseline monitoring can be started even before the TOR is issued, as long as it complies with the TOR. But then yes, the process itself can be shortened further and should be tried to be shortened as far as possible.
I'd just like to add, because since you referred to the shortage of time, curtailing the time, just 2 minutes, ma'am. Curtailing the time period. First thing is the understanding of the challenge, that under what law you are applying. You should be very clear that you are applying under which section of the environmental EIA notification. Because recently many amendments have come in the recent pass through OMs and the SOs, where the application submitted is for a different purpose, but it is coming in a different section. It cannot be accepted. That is the first thing. Second thing is, most of the time, when the report is submitted by the consultant, it is also the responsibility of the PP to see that what is there in the report. He just can't sign the report that yes, I accept that report. What are the facts in the report he need to be seen, because those are the issues which are raised by the committee members in time to time. The third thing is the right monitoring, right procedure, and I can tell you that what Mr. Prashant mentioned, there have been many instances where EC has been granted within 6 months. And if you want, I can give you examples also. So it's not that it is delayed because of not because of the procedure, but not the right format, right law or right section under which is coming. So it's the responsibility of the consultant as well as the PP to ensure that the reports are in the right way meeting the requirement of the EIA notification 2006 and the various OM which have been coming subsequently. So if you have any clarification, we can discuss in the lunch break. We can do that. So because the time is short, we are overrunning it. So thanks very much. And I thank my panelists and the audience for a wonderful time. And it was quite a learning experience for me also. So thanks.